All skills and recommendations made in this DVD are guidelines. There are no hard and fast rules that apply every time to every case. If you follow the recommendations made in this DVD, you will have success most of the time, but not always. Sometimes you will have to adapt to the needs of the patient or do what works for you. The original purpose of the FAST exam was to teach minimal ultrasound skills that could be quickly learned and applied by people with little or no ultrasound knowledge or skills. This is also a great way to begin learning abdominal ultrasound. Beginners are encouraged to use the ultrasound machine and charge for the service. Let's learn some minimal ultrasound skills. The transducer has a small notch or protrusion on one side to show the direction of the ultrasound beam. For the FAST exam, the transducer index should always be pointing toward the patient's head. I sometimes place a red arrow on the transducer to point in the direction of the transducer index. If the patient is in dorsal recumbency, the transducer is held with the head of the transducer facing downward. The transducer can be held in the right or left hand. The index finger, middle finger, and ring finger are on the side of the transducer away from you. The thumb is on the side of the transducer toward you. The little finger is used to anchor the transducer hand to the patient's body, and then the transducer is anchored to the little finger. The edge of the hand is also anchored to the patient's body when possible. Anchoring the transducer hand to the patient's body helps prevent unintentional transducer movements. Most of the time, the transducer is held perpendicular to the patient's body or the organ being imaged. If the patient is standing or sternal, it is more comfortable to hold the transducer by an alternative method. In this method, the transducer is held with the head facing either upward or laterally. The little finger, ring finger, and middle finger are on the side of the transducer away from you. The thumb is still on the side of the transducer toward you. The index finger is used to anchor the transducer to the patient's body and prevent unintentional transducer movement. The ultrasound beam is similar to this laser light line. It is relatively long from top to bottom, but very narrow from side to side. The only thing we see on the ultrasound screen is what is inside the ultrasound beam. The ultrasound beam creates a limited two-dimensional image of abdominal organs on the ultrasound screen. By using the transducer to move the ultrasound beam through the patient's body, we can add to the image and create a three-dimensional image of the organs in our minds. Included with this DVD is an abdominal graphic with numbers to indicate the transducer locations for the FAST exam for effusions. If you roll up a bath towel and curl the graphic over the towel, it gives a good approximation of the location of the major organs of the abdomen. You can use this graphic to practice the transducer locations and movements to view the abdominal organs. For the FAST exam, most transducer movements are limited to fanning. Fanning is a side-to-side movement of the transducer from a point of fixation. That means the point of contact of the head of the transducer on the patient's body does not change as you fan. For the FAST exam, we will fan in one direction and then reverse to fan in the other direction. The sagittal position is the long axis of the patient's body, stretching from the patient's head to the tail. To achieve this view, the index indicator of the transducer must face the patient's head, and the ultrasound beam lies in the long axis of the patient's body. For the FAST exam, ventral midline sagittal or left or right lateral sagittal positions are used. When describing transducer movements in this DVD, I will be describing where the ultrasound beam should move in the patient's body. When the transducer is perpendicular to the patient's body, the ultrasound beam is directly underneath the transducer. If I say to fan to the patient's right side, it is the ultrasound beam that moves to the patient's right side. When I say to point cranially, the ultrasound beam moves cranially under the ribs and into the liver. To fan to the patient's right, the ultrasound beam moves to the patient's right and into the gallbladder. Think of all transducer movements as where the ultrasound beam is moving in the patient's body.